Good morning, everybody. Welcome to one of our first sessions here this morning. On behalf of the DBA Board of Directors, I have the honor of welcoming you to this morning's session, From the Farm to the Capitol, How Farmers Make a Difference in Elected Positions. We hope you find insights learned from this session valuable, as it is important that leaders in agriculture serve in these important roles. Know that the DBA staff is here to support you along your journey if you ever would like to consider running for an elected position. Now let's welcome today's panelists. We have Representative Travis Tranel here. He's from Cuba City, was elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly in 2010. He's currently serving his 7th term. He lives on his family farm with his wife, Stephanie, and their 5 children, a lifelong resident of Grant County. Travis is a 5th-generation dairy farmer. Today, Travis maintains his passion for farming and production through his dairy farm, Tranel Family Farms, which he took a leadership role in after his father became ill in 2002. Today, the farm milks close to 550 cows. Travis, who farms in close cooperation with much of his family, takes great pride in being able to keep small family dairies alive and viable. In addition to the dairy, Travis also owns a custom square baling business with his cousin. The business bales for more than 40 farmers in southwest Wisconsin and northwest Illinois. Our next panelist is Audrey Kusilek. Audrey chose to enter Barron County politics due to poor representation of women and farmers on the 26-member county board. She currently serves as a District 26 supervisor, having been elected in April of 2022. She was assigned to the Zoning Committee, Land Conservation, Extension Committee, and the 5-year Library Plan Committee due to her personal interests and background. In addition to serving on the county board, she previously served 9 years on the Rice Lake Area School District Board. Audrey was born and raised in Barron County and came back to the area in '99 shortly after she and her husband Jim purchased their dairy farm. Prior to the farm purchase, they were both employed in the banking industry. The dairy has 1,500 cows and 1,200 heifers on site. Nearly all their forage and corn needs are grown on their 2,400 acres. They have a heavy emphasis on animal health and land conservation practices. And our last panelist is Justin Peterson. Justin lives in Bangor, Wisconsin with his wife, Louisa, and 4 children. He is the operating partner in a non-family farm business. Justin moved to Wisconsin from Michigan in 2001 to complete a dairy internship in Amory and bought his first 5 dairy heifers in 2004. He and his wife moved twice across Wisconsin with kids and cows. A wanted ad in the newspaper brought 2 families together, and the Creamery Creek Holsteins was started in 2010. Today, Creamery Creek is milking 675 cows, operates cropping and beef enterprises, and also direct markets farm products. Justin is active in his local community and serves on the Bangor Town Board. He puts cow comfort at the top of his management philosophies, knowing that investments will always pay dividends. Creamery Creek regularly hosts on-farm education and dairy promotion events. Welcome our 3 panelists, and Chad Zuliger, our government affairs leader, is going to moderate for us. So,
excellent.
Thank you, Paul. Chad.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you all for being here today. We're going to talk about why it's important for producers and farmers to engage in government at all levels, and I'm really excited to have this panel here today. I think to get things started, I just would like to do a quick introduction, tell us a little personal stories, what motivated you all to engage in elected office, what prompted you, were there particular issues, and what success did you find in the running process? Audrey, would you like to begin?
Sure, thank you. I had been on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin board for 6 years, and I was on the school board previously, but I think local government is important for farmers to be on. So I made the decision in October, November of 2021 that I was going to throw my name The incumbent ended up running. I didn't know if he was or not. But running an election today is kind of easy because you have all the resources that you can buy.
Don't look at me, speak for yourself.
Well, the databases where you can find your voter lists. So I did a professional headshot, had a print company do a flyer for me, and I just decided that in 2 townships that I was going to represent, to try and knock on doors in a township was not probably a very feasible opportunity. So I did a mailer. I ended up, the gentleman I ran against was in the other township. I basically won because I ended up with more votes in his township than he ended up in my township, which kind of, but different school districts divide the 2 townships, so I was very pleased with how that worked out. I went to the town board meetings, made sure I was at the election days, collected, actually, and I also went to the days when they collected taxes.
Okay.
To try to reach out and meet people. So that was I just think production agriculture needs a seat at the table, and that was why I chose to do it.
Well, excellent. And we know that production agriculture does need a seat at the table. And as we work in the state capitol and carry the dairy message forward to our lawmakers, fewer and fewer of them have connections to dairy farms, to farms, and agriculture in general. Travis, you're one of our rare exceptions, having served now in your 7th term, one of the very few voices who have experience in production agriculture. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what prompted you to run?
Sure. So thank you for having me here today. It's always been a pleasure to work with the Dairy Business Association. You guys are a strong voice in the Capitol, and I'm always proud to partner with you and advocate for the things that are important for all of us. Quite frankly, I think I was just young and naive when I decided to run for office. It was not easy. The first time that I ran in 2008, and I actually lost. I outperformed the top of the ticket by 11 points and still lost. That was when Barack Obama was running for president, and he was very popular. He ended up getting 64% of the vote in my district, and we still almost won. And I'm generally, most farmers are very optimistic people. To be completely honest with you, after I lost that election, that was tough because I knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, was trying to beat a Democrat incumbent. I look back now, I was only 22 years old at the time. I don't know how I got any votes, to be honest. Looking at my picture, I don't know if I would have voted for me. That was crazy. Jeff Curry, who works in my office, has been with me the whole time. I'm not sure what we were thinking. But the political climate changed between 2008 and 2010. And when I lost the first time, I said I was done with politics and I wanted nothing to do with it. My original draw to politics, I say this all the time because it's the truth, and I'm just one of these people that loves America. I think we're the greatest country in the world. I thought that then, I think that today, and I just wanted to get involved and be a part of it. And after I had lost, I just didn't want anything to do with it. In 2008, I had to go around, ask all these people to vote for me, ask these people to think about supporting me. In 2010, the climate changed so much that those people that I was asking for support for were coming to me and asking me if I would run again. And the second time, I put my name on the ballot. We still worked pretty hard, but not nearly as hard as we did in 2008, and we ended up beating an incumbent by like 14 points or something. And now I win re-election with 63% of the vote quite consistently. So it's really been a ride. It's been a pleasure. It still amazes me. I've been able to stay very active within our dairy farm, and quite frankly, that's one of the reasons that I've been able to mentally stay in the legislature this long, is because when I started, politics was sort of an escape for me to get away from the farm. When they read in my bio that I started farming very early. My dad got diagnosed with cancer when I was in high school, and that's basically when I took over our farm. And I went to college during that time and was employing people, and it was just very busy, and politics was a nice escape from that. And now it's totally the opposite. I love going home to farm because it gets me out of this city. Not that I don't like this city.
So Justin, you serve on the town board in Bangor. What's the population of Bangor?
The population of Bangor, I believe, is like 568 people.
Yep.
So it's a small rural township. You know, I was asked to run by a retiring board member, a fellow farmer who had served, I believe, 8 terms on our board. And he felt it was necessary to keep the voice of agriculture on our town board. And so that was, I guess, why I threw my hat in the ring. It was easy, I guess, in our township. You know, I ran unopposed, so it was kind of a cakewalk on that end. No professional headshots or pounding on doors. I just had my name.
I think I just run for the wrong office.
You know, I think from my point of view, you know, town government is where it all starts. You know, and if we don't have boots on the ground in the rural areas of Wisconsin, you know, ag could suffer. So we have to keep our voices loud and proud.
Great. So all 3 levels of government, town, county, and state, there's some bleed over and issues you might be dealing with, but what are some critical issues you're facing at your level of government, whether it be zoning, redistricting, boundaries, annexations? Who would like to talk about some of the issues you see on your own government board?
Go ahead.
Justin?
Okay. So, you know, the town of Bangor is in La Crosse County, and the La Crosse area keeps encroaching on the rural side of La Crosse County. So for us, one of our main focuses and challenges is, you know, land use, trying to keep our county, or our township rural, have the land for farming of any sort. You know, we are actually just redoing our comprehensive plan for our township and just trying to get the right people to assist us so that, you know, we can keep agriculture viable in La Crosse County. You know, we had our county zoning committee out for a meeting, I believe 2 weeks ago, and they're kind of pushing us to look at developing more of our township. You know, pushing subdivisions and selling it with the tax base side, and the tax base will help our schools. And I understand that side of it, but I guess being that all of our income comes from farming, I'm going to fight to keep it rural.
Good, good. Audrey, at the county level?
You know, I think there's a lot of issues outside of agriculture that counties are dealing with. You have, you know, the opioid, the mental health, those kind of issues, the health and human services. I think our county is it runs well.
Mm-hmm.
The departments work together so that it's not a...
How many members are on your county board?
There's 26 members.
26.
We each probably represent about 2,000 people.
Okay.
So 45,000 people in the county. And we have a mix between, you know, like in the city of Rice Lake, they have 4 representatives on the county board that are city residents.
Yep.
I have 2 townships. Most people have at least 1 township, if not 2,
Okay.
to represent. So, but I think road issues are going to be a bigger part. And how do we deal with that? How do we work together with the state and the townships to figure out plans?
Okay.
Because there's just not enough funds, I don't think, to maintain roads going forward. And is it working together? Is it 2 townships sharing road equipment and road guys? Is it, you know, we're seeing some spots where they're sharing clerks now because of the expertise it takes to run townships.
And Travis, you hear town and county issues all the time, and again, a wide array of issues, but from a state perspective, how is town and county government work together with the state? Are there issues that you share, or are you always fighting other units of government or fighting for other units of government? Obviously, there's shared revenue and a lot of transportation costs come from the state. How do you balance that in the state role?
The way that I look at it, being a person that represents a rural area, I'm not sure how many towns I represent, but I bet you it's 50, 60 or more. I view local units of government as a partner, and I would hope that when they come to us and ask for things, I view it as we're working with them, not against them. I'm very concerned when I hear things like consolidation of town services, because to me, you know, all three of us are farmers, and I'm sure your towns probably operate the same way that mine does. I know who plows my town road, and my town road guy knows what time we start milking. He knows what time we have to get people in there, and he makes sure that our town road is plowed before a lot of other town roads where it's not such a big deal. As we consolidate services and we combine towns, or we lean on the county to do that, that level of service goes away, and I don't think our taxes will go down. So to me, we're very much partners. Quite frankly, I think we need to be asking for more for our rural areas, because ag is a $105 billion industry in this state. It's our second largest economic driver. We employ about 430,000 people. We are not a stepchild or a second-class citizen in this state, and sometimes we get treated that way. And I am very adamant within our caucus to make sure that rural Wisconsin has a seat at the table. And quite frankly, I think moving forward, we have an opportunity to do more. We've done quite a bit in the past, but we seem to always continue to do what we've always done. And at some point, we're going to have to start changing how we operate a little bit, or in town government and in county government, you are not going to be able to maintain the level of services that you are maintaining today. And currently in this state, for a whole variety of reasons, when I first got elected, we had a $3.6 billion budget deficit. Today, hopefully you're well aware, that number is pushing close to a $7 billion surplus. So there are opportunities to change how we do things in rural Wisconsin, and that's why I'm excited to work with groups like yours, because we have to seize that opportunity. Because if we don't ask, we're not going to get it. That's one thing I've learned in the 13 or 14 years that I've been here. If you're not ready to seize opportunities, they're not going to come knocking on your door and saying, hey, would you like this? That's just not how it works.
And that leads right into one of the other issues I wanted to talk about, is how do you represent agriculture, production agriculture, on your level of government? Do you find it difficult? Are forces opposing you? Are there people that don't understand what's happening in agriculture and why ordinances might be good or bad? Road postings, road closures. Are you seeing those kind of issues at the local level and county level?
I think Barron County supports agriculture.
Good.
I mean, I think that they're aware of the fact that we have the Genio turkey processing, in the county seat, which employs a lot of people. A lot of birds are raised that are going in there. We have, a cheese plant in the county, or right on the very edge of the county. So I think they're aware of those processes.
So you don't have to make the case.
No,
Okay.
I think there's enough representatives that understand. The interesting is that a lot of them might not be part of agriculture, but the gentleman, the supervisor I sit next to, he was raised on a farm, and
Okay.
He understands it now. 10 years, 15 years, are we not going to have those people that have those backgrounds? So it might be different in Barron County, but we're still pretty rural in Barron County.
Well, we hear a lot of stories locally at town and county levels around the state where agriculture is kicked around and ordinances are passed that restrict operations on farms outside of the livestock siting area. And so, when we talk about this, we want farmers at the table that can explain that. And oftentimes we discover that they just don't understand how these ordinances really impact day-to-day operations on farms. So by serving on these boards, you help educate and communicate the dairy message so that when laws are passed, ordinances are passed, they take into account the considerations of agriculture.
We did have a situation in Barron County where there was a township that was going to shut a road down to truck traffic basically year-round.
Yep.
But the turkey store had to run feed trucks up that road. The co-ops were running propane trucks and fertilizer trucks and grain trucks, and there was enough outcry that the township had to
Yep, and citizens.
change their thought, and
Yep.
enough people voiced their displeasure, and it was stopped, and they had to just rebuild the road to a different standard because of the use of the road, so.
And that's excellent, and that's what we're seeing around is we need to re-look at how our roads are built and start building them for 21st century activities and equipment. So having that voice on the county board, that can be brought to the attention of somebody that might be looking at an ordinance that would negatively impact the industry. So as farmers, you're busy. How do you find time to both serve in government and handle your farm operations? I think that's one thing we want to dispel, that you can do both. But tell us about the pros and cons of that, balancing your work life, your family life, and then your government responsibilities as well. Travis, do you want to kind of speak to that? You've had the most experience.
You should talk to the people that work in our office about that, because I feel sorry for the people that run my schedule, because when people call and ask if we can meet, I always say, well, if we're not busy on the farm or if it's raining, those days would work great. Winter months work better than spring, summer, and fall, so fantastic on the planning for this event. Technology has changed a ton. I know nobody wants to talk about COVID, but just we're able to meet on Zoom now, and I know Zoom's a dirty word, but sometimes, I can save a whole day just by meeting somebody on Zoom as opposed to running up to the Capitol, meeting them there, and then having to drive back home. You obviously have to be pretty good with time management. It has to be important to you. You have to be able to want to do both, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to. I also think that because I represent a rural area, my constituents are pretty understanding that there are some events that I'm not going to be at because I'm farming. And I think that's just part of the gig, because I represent a lot of farmers and they understand how busy they are. And I think they really appreciate that I'm still farming, because I'm very much still one of them. I have grave concerns about not only the makeup of the legislature, but our towns and county boards moving forward, because from the counties and the towns that I represent, I've seen just in my short tenure, the composition of the people who serves on those boards are definitely changing. You hit the nail on the head when you said, today they may have some tie to agriculture because they went to their grandpa's farm during summer break, or their uncle farmed. In a generation, those ties are going to be few and far between. And that is so concerning, because I often see, and I'm sure you see this a lot up around La Crosse, the people that are retiring and moving in, and this is only exacerbated since COVID, everybody wants their 40 acres in the woods. Those are the people that have time to serve on these town boards, and they have time to go to county meetings, and they don't necessarily understand the interests of agriculture. So I think it's super important that as an industry, we encourage our fellow farmers and people that are originally from and have been born and raised in rural areas to run and serve on these boards.
Yep. And not to harp on the negative, because we do want to encourage folks to run for office, but Justin, has there been any frustrations you've seen? What are some pros and cons in your experience so far, obviously being a new town board member, but I'm sure there have been some ups and downs already.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge from my perspective was we kind of walked into the good old boys club. We sat and listened to the opening speaker today talk about disruption and change, and that's probably been the biggest challenge on my end, is trying to make changes. And thankfully we had some board turnover, so we've got some like-minded individuals, but the prior regime, I guess, it was like 1950, and now we're trying to even bring up our processes and procedures to be a little bit more modern. So there's been a lot of headache and heartache, I would say, on that end. And I'm only a supervisor, so I don't deal with the brunt of it. My wife, who's sitting out here, is our clerk, and she's got the hardest job in the town, and she's our backbone, I guess, for us and our support.
Audrey, any surprises for you in your first term on the board?
I think for Barron County, the county board meets typically at night. 7 o'clock, so there's some push that they would like to move that up to 5 o'clock. But all committee meetings, because they're typically part of staffing, they're during the day. So there are a lot of people that would be really good people to serve on the county board, but if their jobs, even if they're not farmers, I mean, they might be really good people, but they just can't take that kind of time off.
Sure.
To do those things. So it is and so then it falls into people that are retired, that have time on their hands, that maybe aren't as connected. And so that is a negative and that's, I think, local county government that is probably always going to have that. But so I think it is important, if people do have time to run and have an interest in running, that you get on and you have your voice heard.
So Travis, you see a lot of government, whether it be at the state or dealing with your local units of government. And we've had conversations before. We hear a lot about government's bloated, needs to be streamlined. How is government working in your opinion today? And are there areas that could be improved, or do we really need the bureaucracy to run the day-to-day operations? Where are areas that you see in your role that could be streamlined, or do we really need that level of occupation in the government field?
That's a loaded question. So I would start by saying, in general, I have begun to take the position that as a society, we are way too negative. So there are lots of things that are wrong with our government, but in the grand scheme of things, we're doing pretty well. And I think we should acknowledge that. There's still no other country in the world that I would like to live in. For the most part, it's a cold day, we have electricity, we are warm, we have food, we have plenty of drinks out there, kids are going to school, our government is functioning. There's lots of parts in the world in 2023, they cannot say that. So though I am definitely a proponent of limited government, we do need some government, and our government is functioning. I think we should acknowledge that. We should be very thankful that we still have in Wisconsin, we have rural representatives, we have towns, we have counties, we have people that are willing to serve in these positions. We have moms and dads that are willing to go to school board meetings in the middle of the night to make sure that their kids are getting a good quality education. We have great public schools in Wisconsin. I mean, there are a lot of good things going on in Wisconsin. We have a budget surplus. That said, there's always room for improvement. Government needs to be more responsive. Government employees, quite frankly, should go back to work. One of my biggest frustrations right now, somebody calls me, they're having a problem getting a licensure, or who knows what their problem with government is, and we pick up the phone. Sometimes I pick up the phone, I call over to an office building, and there's nobody in that office building because they're not working from home. Or they are working from home, they're not going to work. That needs to change. There's always opportunities to save money. We have to understand that if people are going to work and live and do business in this state, from a tax climate, we are competing with not only all of our neighbors, but now we're basically competing with every state in the country. So we have to make sure that people can afford to retire here. We have to make sure people can afford to raise their families here. So there are always going to be challenges. There are always going to be things that we can improve, but I also think that it's important to stop and smell the fresh air and realize that it's not always doom and gloom. I don't watch the national news anymore. I got off of Facebook. I don't read the comments. I don't need it. I still read the newspaper. 37 years old, I read the newspaper every day. I love it. But there are a lot of good things going on in this state and in this country, but it is so easy to get sucked into that negative 24-hour news cycle and just get yourself in a very bad mental health space. And I don't think we need to do that. And I think that's incumbent upon all of us. We can all take a part in that.
Good, thank you. Justin or Audrey, at your level of government, do you see a lot of services? Are there things that are going undone, or do you think that your level of government employment is just about right? You've got a lot of board supervisors in Barron County. That's a big number, 26. Mm-hmm. Is that necessary, or could that be? Would citizens lose the services if we reduce the number of county board supervisors?
10 years ago, when I was on the school board in Rice Lake, we had the same conversation. We had 9 members. There's a lot of 5-member, a lot of 7-member school boards. Do we really need 9? But then you look at having 4 or 5 committee responsibilities. And if you only have 5 people, then how much extra time do those people need to put in? So when we look at the county and Barron County, and there's, 12 or 15 committee responsibilities, it just gets to be too much for one person to think, I'm going to want to go to 6 committee meetings every month. Where would I find the time to do that? So if I have to do 2, it's manageable.
So what committees do you serve on?
I serve on the zoning and then the land conservation extension committee, and then I was assigned to the 5-year library plan, which is 5 years, and I happened to get assigned to it the first year we had to do something, so we had to redo our library plan. Good. Which was an interesting process. I did not know that that was a service that counties had to provide, so that was interesting. But the zoning, we're a little slow right now because it's non-building, so people aren't planning for things, but it's going to pick up now. We didn't really even have a meeting in December and January because we didn't have any zoning requests that came in. Our zoning, the big project we're going to work on, and it is a little bit agriculture related, but it's a fowl ordinance. The county doesn't have one right now, and we have 2 cities in our county that have ordinances for chickens or ducks or geese. Mm-hmm. And the county is going to have to put one together because there's so many people that I was shocked that there are this many people that would want to raise 100 feeder chickens a year and butcher and have food for their family and live on a 1-acre chunk or a 2-acre chunk. So that was interesting to me that there is that interest in people, and we don't really have an avenue for them to be able to do that in Barron County. So. Good.
And Justin, in Bangor, what do you see as far as town government officials, staff, just about right, or are there areas that you've been able to identify already that could be trimmed?
From the town board side, it's a 3-member board, and then clerk and treasurer. We had 1 full-time town employee. We have eliminated that position, trying to just conserve cash. Our township was broke, and we couldn't offer very good services because we had no money. And being, a town of 500 and some odd people, we actually have the village of Bangor that kind of divides our town in half. So, as the village has annexed more of the township away, we've lost some roads. We had a hard time justifying this full-time person, so, we've kind of cut back on some of our services intentionally.
So on 3 levels of government, we see different in how they operate, but in all of it, it's really citizen-led, and it really is important. If it's not a producer, it's going to be somebody else, and that's why it's really critical for farmers to engage, whether you're talking about your town board or your county board, or even if you have an interest in state government. I want to shift just a little bit. Again, talking to folks that we'd like to encourage their service in government. What would you tell somebody if somebody came to you, said, I'm thinking about running for the state legislature, I'm thinking about running for town board or county board? What kind of advice would you give them? I know that Justin and Audrey, you're still in your first term and relatively new. Travis, you've served 6 full terms now, in your 7th. How would you advise somebody seeking your office? I'll start with Audrey first.
I would say you should, not my position, but you should.
Good answer. She's new, but she's smart. Yeah.
You should go. There's resources. There's the edge. I think that there are all kinds of people, if you raise your hand and say you're interested, that are willing to reach out and help you. When I ran for school board, it was a very, very intense election process then. But I reached out to one of the people that helped, and this is what I'm thinking about, and he's like, no, you don't want to say that, no, you don't want to say that, and I said it anyway. But it's people will give you their opinion and offer their help. I had people that said, hey, call here, they'll give you a discount on your printing if you're going to do a mailing. Call here, she does a headshot, she'd be really good to do a headshot for you. So I just think you get out the word and people will.
There are resources out there.
Resources
and DBA, and we certainly encourage that, and we act as a resource and happy to talk to anybody and help anybody looking or interested in possibly running, share those resources and get you pointed in the right direction. Travis, from a state level, you were approached, you had some ideas that you wanted to run. But if somebody came and said, I want to run for office, there's going to be an open seat, or if they want to challenge an incumbent, how would your advice differ in those scenarios?
Well, open seats are definitely easier to win. I would tell them that right off the bat. But one of the biggest frustrations that I think we have, especially as a society, we watch all of that news and then we get frustrated because things aren't going the way that we want them to go or the way that we would do them if we held those seats. But we think to ourselves that it's not possible for me to be in that position. And I tell kids all the time, I love speaking to students, it is so easy to get involved. That's one of the great things about living in this country. You know, I'm a farmer from Grant County, and now I chair the Assembly Committee on Ag. It's easier to get involved, and you can be more effective than what you realize. So I would tell them that they have to make sure that their heart's in it and that they want to do it for the right reasons and that they're willing to make the commitment, because it is a lot of work and it is a big commitment, but it's also doable. And I think a lot of people just don't view it as a realistic opportunity, and that opportunity is very much there. And if people feel like they have the desire and the calling to serve, I would highly encourage it. I would tell them to run for the Senate, but not run for my seat.
Good. Justin, town board, it's new, it's small, it's a little bit different than the county and the state. Been positive so far, and would you recommend, what would you recommend somebody do that might be interested in running for town board?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been a positive experience, you know. I think if people want to run for the town board, that is a great decision. You know, we have such an impact on our small little communities, and if it's not me, then who else is it? You know, and we need the right representation on our boards, and unless it was a person with a terrible agenda, you know, I would strongly encourage anybody to get involved at the local government, because it all starts at home.
It all starts at the local level, but it permeates all the way up. Travis, there's an assembly and then there's a Senate. How do you work with your colleagues, and what is that relationship like, Democrat to Republican, but also from assembly to Senate? How does that work, and does dairy or agriculture get the attention it needs, do you feel, in the state legislature?
I think my colleagues would say that I am always talking about rural areas, rural issues, and agriculture. I think our government works better than what we give it credit for. To your previous question, sometimes I wonder if we should almost require that everybody serve in these seats, because then they would understand how what we do is oftentimes more of a broader package or agenda, and we can't get pigeonholed into just one agenda and one issue area, because the reality is rural areas and agriculture are important to me, but to some of my colleagues, they might not understand why it's important to them, but they have other issues that are very, very important to them and to their districts. And if I want them to pay attention and be helpful with what I'm working on, I owe it to them and respect them enough that I have to pay attention to what they're working on and what the needs are for their citizens as well. And so I think that we work together pretty well. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about our government is that it is always a Republican versus Democrat divide. In my full 6 terms in the legislature, I would submit that the divide, in my opinion, is more urban versus rural. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to bridge that gap, but it's not as partisan as people think. It's more urban versus rural. And we are having that conversation right now because we're trying to figure out what do we do with this several billion-dollar surplus. Do we give it all back to the taxpayers? Certainly some of it's going to go back to them in one form or another. If I have my say, a lot of it's going to go to rural areas and to farmers. That's why I need Chad's help. But there's also going to be a lot of it that goes back to local units of government. And we have to decide what local units of government does it go to, how does it go back to them, and there is definitely a appetite in that building to encourage consolidation, encourage efficiencies. and I am all for that, but I think we also have to be realistic and recognize that for the 500 people that live in your town, you can only cut so much. You still have to push the snow, you still have to chip seal the roads, you still have to get feed from the field to your farm. And so just consolidating is not going to work if we want a high quality of life in rural Wisconsin. And the reality is 1/3 of our population lives in rural areas of this state. So it's very important.
That's an excellent point, and rural versus urban is, hate to pit those two against each other, but oftentimes that's the argument that's made, particularly at the state level, but even at the county level, I would imagine too, and other counties that do have both rural and urban sectors. I imagine that argument takes place and that conversation is had a lot. I wanted to let everybody know that we're happy to take questions. We do have a microphone here. If you just step up to that so that we can get your voice, because we are recording the session. But feel free to step up there and we can certainly entertain that. Anything else you wanted to address or point out? Obviously, I hope that people in this room are considering running for office at all levels of government. We have village and city as well. But is there anything that you'd like to impart?
I think another, though, avenue for people, if they don't want to put their name on a ballot, either on the town board or county or state, is, they're always looking for committees and people to do work on some of those things. At the county level, there's quite a bit. And if it's an interest or it's a concern as a taxpayer, try and get your name on some of those committees to be able to impact, also have another group of people that have agriculture at the forefront.
That's a great point, and that's not even running for office. That's just putting your name out there, saying that I'm willing to serve in some capacity, and oftentimes those are advisory roles to your town board or county board.
I think Audrey raises a great point there. Especially when you talk about young people that have families, they might not have the time to serve, but you can make a big difference without serving, even just knowing. I would hope all of you know who your town representatives are. I would hope all of you know who your county, what district you live in, because quite honestly, I would speculate 85% of the population probably has no idea who their county representative is. They might have heard so-and-so's name on the radio, but they don't know if they live in their district. You should know those people, and they should know you. You should have their phone number, and they should answer when you call. If your town or county board is going through a contentious issue, write a letter to the editor to help these guys out. There are lots of things you can do to get involved and to be helpful without running for office.
That's a great point. I think that number's higher than 85%.
Well,
I hope not.
We're being recorded, you said. So, yeah.
Great point, and really appreciate that. We have a question.
Is this on? No. Oh, wait. I don't know. There we go. I think I got it?
Yep.
All right, yeah. So you all represent a certain amount of people, a certain amount of constituents, and I think a lot of the reason that people don't want to run is because they don't want to have angry neighbors. What kind of feedback do you get from your neighbors? How do you deal with that, and how do you just deal with your constituents? Or is it not as bad as everybody makes it sound like?
When I ran for school board, when I was also on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin board and now on the county board, my cell phone is the number that my contact is. And I answer it, I don't screen calls. So if someone calls, my number's out there, but I don't get a lot of calls. I might get a text message from someone that'll say, hey, I saw this in the newspaper, what's up? And I'll look into it and get back to them, but I don't get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
So I'm new though too, so.
Justin?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we've kind of learned is that people don't care until it affects them. Mm-hmm. And even participation at our board meetings, which is kind of frustrating because it makes us realize how uninvolved people are in any form of government. So yeah, we don't field many phone calls unless it's specific to one individual and their wants or needs.
Well, there's a void. That sounds like there's a void out there when people don't care, that there are opportunities for people who do care. And so I think that's kind of the takeaway is if you care, get involved in some way or another. Travis, what's your
I take
thought?
a similar approach to Audrey. Everybody that calls and wants to talk to me, I will call them back. My cell phone number is readily available. People call me all the time. At the state level, we do get a lot of people that are upset with the decisions that we make. First off, I try to understand and see things from their perspective. I try to dial down the partisanship and just have a level-headed conversation. Sometimes you're able to do that, sometimes you're not. At the state level, I think you need to have pretty thick skin because you have to realize no matter what we do, probably 40% of the population is not going to agree with it. But there are certain people that, quite frankly, if they don't agree with me, I know I'm in a good spot. Because I don't want everybody's vote. And those people, when they call and they complain, I just listen and then I dismiss it. Just like within your businesses or just like within your families, there are, you respect everybody, but there are certain people whose opinions you respect more so than other people's. And, those are the people that I want to please and work for. And the rest of them, it is what it is. You just get used to dealing with it. You got to know you're doing the right thing for the right reason.
We have a question. Tell us your name, please.
Thank you. My name's Holly Bellmond. I live in Brown County, Wisconsin, northeastern Wisconsin, which is in the national news a lot for which way is it going to go. It's an exciting place to live because we have this blend of rural and urban in close proximity. What you raised really became true during COVID, which is rural broadband, lack of rural broadband in rural areas in Wisconsin, in Brown County, across the country is pitiful and really holds back the development of the rural areas. It makes it a difficult place to live, makes it a difficult place to educate children, makes it a difficult place to work remotely or even have access to technology. I, like everybody here, likes positive things. So I think it's actually quite positive that at the federal level, there's alliance on rural broadband. Where else do you see the rural and urban divide, which you shared? But of course we know that. We see the big square states are 100% red always. Those are rural states, usually, not always. If we can come together on rural broadband, what else can we come together on? Or what do you see from your shoes that you're optimistic about in Wisconsin for the parties working together to benefit the rural economy?
Yeah, in this state, we've put a ton of money state money into rural broadband as well. And even that, so you raise a great point. So there is consensus that we need to increase rural broadband so people that live in rural areas have access to the rest of the world, essentially. And so we agree there. Then the way that we fund it is sometimes through grant programs. And so this is where it gets sticky, because if you're a more urban area, how many people do you have on your town board that have time to fill out this thick a grant application?
Right.
Exactly. So the money might be there, but how it actually gets to where it needs to be is what we look at. So rural broadband definitely come together on. I think we can come together on shared revenue. Shared revenue is how these guys get money. Again, it's going to be, we're going to be able to have a consensus and understand that the shared revenue formula is almost 20-something plus years old, needs to be updated. But where those dollars flow, that is going to be the challenge. Schools, despite what you might hear on the news, when I first got elected, the first state budget that I voted for was $56 billion. The last one that I voted for was $88 billion. That's a pretty substantial increase, I think most farmers would say. We have been under Republican conservative control in the legislature that entire time. So I think a lot of times, just if we're going to have a debate, we should start with the facts. And so there is consensus on making sure that our schools are good. We're still funding our schools. I'm excited in this state. The Dairy Innovation Hub is a great thing we could point to, a huge success where a Republican legislature passed that and a Democrat governor signed it and implemented it. There are lots of areas where we come together. Exports is another one, huge bipartisan support there. I think the number is usually about 95% of the bills that pass the legislature have bipartisan support. It's just not the things that you hear about because people aren't interested in it. So there are lots of areas where we come together. It's where we disagree that gets all the attention, and then those disagreements suck up the air, and then we focus less on that urban-rural divide, which is the true issue, in my opinion.
That's a great way to put that too. You know, the media really does play a role in what's discussed out there. Every session, the legislature puts out, you know, a list of the bills and then percentages that had bipartisan support. And you're right, it's very high. 95 or higher are supported in a bipartisan way. And they really do. The media will focus solely on the areas of disagreement and hype them up too. So that's a great point. I want to go back to the broadband part of that question and talk to Justin and Audrey too. You're in rural areas of the state. How's broadband connectivity in your town and in your county? Justin, what's happening in Bangor? Are you guys able to connect to the internet? Are you joining the rest of the world?
Our internet connection is pretty sketchy on a good day, but thankfully infrastructure is going in. It started last year, so it'll be a couple-year process, but we are moving forward.
Yep, and I know the state is still talking about that. There's more dollars, there's additional federal dollars coming in, and when we talk about where that's going in a township, generally that's directed to the center of the town, whereas farmers and production agriculture needs that connectivity out in the fields. Oftentimes farm equipment is now equipped with GPS equipment that helps spread nutrients and directs them into areas needed. And so the broadband connectivity now is having an impact on some of the water quality efforts that farmers are asked to participate in. So we talk about that a lot in the state capitol. I know Travis hears it a lot, and there is a lot of money. It's just how it's being utilized and how towns can also take advantage of that. Audrey, what's happening in Barron County?
We have a local telephone cooperative, and they've been very aggressive in applying for some of the grants. So there are some big pockets that now, you know, have fiber that do. At our house, not so much.
Okay.
So we couldn't stream at our house if we wanted to. So it's just one of those things where how do you get everyone? You know, we're a mile off a state highway and we can't stream. So it's a weird mixture on who controls the line that comes to your house and who's going to put it in if you have not a lot of population on our road, and a lot of them probably wouldn't hook up if it came down. So
no, exactly.
How do they run it?
We hear a lot about last mile, and it goes beyond just the last mile. I think that needs to be rethought when we start talking about connecting rural areas. It's not just the center of the town that we need to reach. We need to reach the more rural areas out there where farmers are engaging that technology, whether it be for animal health monitoring, or like I said, the land spreading and nutrient management planning.
But I think it's also electricity. I just became aware last week where we have a section where the electricity demand is bigger than what the end of the line is, and they're going to have to put new transformers and a new substation in to be able to extend it to meet the demand of the electricity. That there's more demand than what the line is capable of, and they're going to have to make big infrastructure changes.
Good. We have another question, sir. Please tell us your name.
Yeah, Tim Keller, here in Dane County, the Lion's Den. Anyway, question is, what do you think about term limits? You hear that's bounced around on the national level, Congress, Senate, all this good, happy stuff. I mean, thank you guys for being on this. And another part is, you talk about people wanting to run. I'm always afraid, just being here in Dane County, are you going to be the first one getting shouted down, and I'm going to have people at my driveway trying to do whatever the hell they do? So,
Travis, you want to field that one?
Well, Dane County is a special place. Keith Ripp was able to do it. He was from Dane County, and he served, and he survived. I think he's loving life now as a farmer. But term limits are interesting because I would put term limits in with part of the discussion that we talked about earlier. They sound great. They have them in some states. So I just started my 7th term. So if we had term limits, I would probably be out. I finally got to the point where I get to chair the Ag Committee. So I finally got to a point now where I'll have a little bit of influence. And no disrespect to Chad or any other lobbyists, but part of what people don't consider is if you have term limits and you don't like lobbyists and bureaucrats, those people are very emboldened because they know they're going to be there longer than you. And so if you think our government doesn't run efficiently now, put the bureaucrats who don't have to get elected, don't have to go to the parades, don't have to return phone calls, give them more power. And I don't think that that is a good thing. So I can understand why it sounds good and people would point to term limits and say, hey, that would really improve our government. In actuality, I am not sold on that.
Excellent. Audrey, Justin,
We
any
don't
thoughts on
have
that?
term limits at the county board level. So.
And I would also point out, I always say I have a job, to your question, I have a very public job review every 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so if I am not returning those phone calls or not representing my citizens, they are free to fire me every 2 years. And in my opinion, that is that's a term limit itself.
So do you think your position would be better served to have it be a 3 or 4 year so that you don't have to spend so much time working an election and you can be doing the work that you should be doing versus?
If I could do what I would like to do, I would say yes. The Assembly or the House of Representatives should be 4-year terms and then have the Senate be 6 or 8. I would agree with that.
And that may be where the conversation needs to be had.
Yeah.
I think that we oftentimes are talking about term limits, but people forget that there are good lawmakers that represent the interests of their constituents, and the constituents have the ability
and
to
I will
term
be
limit
quite
them.
frank, in my tenure, I've seen a lot of people come and go.
Yeah.
And this job is what you make of it. You can put your heart and soul into it, or you can just kind of go along to get along. And the people that want to go along to get along, they usually don't stick around real long. There are certainly exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, voters know who's doing a good job representing them and who's not. And at the federal level right now, I mean, you can say what you want to say, but at the federal level, some of those guys that have been around for a while are keeping the train on the tracks, so to speak.
Well, excellent. That's all the time we have for our panel discussion today. I want to say thank you to Audrey, Justin, and Travis for sharing your experiences and telling your story. Thank you most importantly for putting yourself out there and serving in government. You've all been what must seem like no-win situations, and your willingness to continue serving is to be applauded. We all have a strong desire to see dairy thrive in our state, and you three are a great example of how one person can begin to make that change at every level of government. Let's give our panelists a round of applause and say thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming today. And again, I just want to reiterate that DBA is here, and if you have questions or are interested in running for office or just want to ask some questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're happy to talk. Thank you all for coming today.